Oh, hello. Welcome to TSC Talks, the podcast where we talk about tuberous sclerosis complex. I'm your host, Jill Woodworth, and this is episode 14. We have on today's show a different type of guest. We have an occupational therapist who also happens to have neurofibromatosis, which is a medical condition very closely related to tuberous sclerosis complex. So she talks about her experience with both early intervention as an OT as well as neurofibromatosis and tuberous sclerosis in relation to early intervention services. So it's rich with information. I thank Kristina so much, and take it away. Hello.
Hello. Hi, Jill.
Hello. Welcome to TSC Talks, the podcast where we talk about tuberous sclerosis complex. My name is Jill Woodworth, and I am your host. Thank you very much for listening. On today's podcast, I have a personal friend, Kristina Hansson, who also happens to be a early intervention occupational therapist. And I thought it would be great to have her on to talk about her experience in early intervention. Additionally, Kristina has neurofibromatosis, which is a medical condition very similar to tuberous sclerosis complex. The mutation is on gene 17. And tuberous sclerosis is on 16 and 9, which you listening probably already know. So without further ado, welcome, Kristina. We tried recording this once already and realized that nothing was recording. So hopefully we will continue with the recording. Anyways, take it away, Kristina, and tell me a little bit about your path to becoming an occupational therapist as far as your experiences in childhood contributing to that decision.
Thank you, Jill. Well, I can say there were a few issues in my life that contributed to me wanting to be an occupational therapist. I grew up in Holden, Massachusetts, in a neighborhood that had a lot of kids, and two of those children had Down syndrome, and they were just part of our playgroup. That consisted of going out after dinner, no TV at that time, playing jump rope. We played hide and seek, duck, duck, goose, and that was just normal for us. When I attended school, grammar school, I did have speech therapy myself. Because of the NF that I realize now, I had some low tone in around my mouth. At the time, they blamed it on being bilingual, which is silly, but they told me that, and my speech therapist, we did not have early intervention back in those days. She was Sister Margaret. Yes, she was a nun at the Mercy Center in Worcester, Massachusetts, and I remember her. I was afraid of her. But to get back to this, so I had that, and then I always had I didn't feel sorry for the children who had special needs. I just felt like, I think I can help them. So I started off being a special ed major, and it was with being in front of a lot of children at once, and I didn't like that. I really liked the one-on-one. So fast forward, I went to Worcester State College and became an occupational therapist, and just to get the skills down, I did work in adult rehab for a while, but I started in early intervention back in the probably 1990s, so probably close to 25 years I've been in early intervention. And I love it. Yes, it has its challenges. When we first recorded this, I sort of mouthed to Joe, what was my biggest challenge? And I said paperwork. But despite that,
You love it.
I love it. And I'm hoping that my small part in a family's job would benefit families like yourself.
Oh, thank you. Could you just tell me a little bit about what early intervention is for people out there that might not know?
Early intervention is a service. It is around the whole country. It services children birth to 3. It is a service that provides therapy to children, variety of diagnosis. It can be TSC, it can be neurofibromatosis, Down syndrome, children who get diagnosed with autism. What's really nice about early intervention is you don't have to have a diagnosis. You don't have to have a doctor's referral. If a parent is just worried that a child's not walking or talking, they can make a referral. And because of the state laws, we are required to go in and do an evaluation. We, meaning there would be a group of speech therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, teachers, social workers, and nurses.
So a whole team comes into your house.
Not all those. It's usually a team of 3 or 4.
And they do the eval, and just to elaborate or to reiterate, you can self-refer. It can be a doctor or a DCF.
It can be DCF as well. We're seeing a lot of kids right now, I like to add, not only with the diagnosis, but parents, or mostly the mother, obviously, because they give the birth, are drug addicted, and they call that absentee being addicted to a variety of drugs.
Oh, wow. So, yeah, that's got to be hard for the whole family. I think before we get into that, just tell me, when you're going into a home, so a family goes through the process, the referral process, they're deemed eligible and you start services. So you actually come to people's homes, and tell me a little bit about what you do with the kids.
What I do with the kids, I also want to educate the parents on let's use play as a method to help them develop, whether it's speech or crawling, rolling. Because I'm a motor therapist, it might be something as simple as rolling. The challenge I have is to tell them why just being on the tummy time is important. And parents may say, well, they don't like that. And I said, they don't like it because it's hard work. And even at a young age, they know it's hard work. And if you pick them up, I notice they stop crying right away. That's something I find across the board. I put the baby on the floor. They start to cry. Mom picks them up. The baby looks at me and smiles. Like, see? So, and when parents see that, that sort of breaks what I know what I'm doing. So we try to provide some age-appropriate activities for them. We try to limit the modern toys.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Definitely. It would be the buttons, the whistles. It doesn't teach a child anything. They're entertained by it because all they have to do is push a button. Picking up a block and releasing it into a bucket, trying to put a puzzle piece into a board, that takes thinking. It takes motor skills. It takes attention, which these modern toys, and they're so bright. They're brightly colored. I have these blocks that are probably 30 years old. They're plain wooden blocks.
Do you have them in your car? I remember all the early intervention people that would come to work with the kids in the past would show up with these wonderful bags of toys. That just were really kind of unique, and I know that they often kept them in their cars. So it was not just the therapist; it was the car and the bag that kind of were the candy of the OT.
And I would also have like therapy balls. So the few times that I had been stopped by a police, they would look in the back of my car, and they knew I wasn't anyone bad. So that's a memory I have of having
you were pulled over having the toys.
Oh, well, I was pulled over because I was probably trying to get to a home visit to be on time.
Oh, of course, that's absolutely. So what are the challenges when a family receives they're dealing with a diagnosis and they've started receiving services? How do you balance that kind? Can you just give me some examples and just discuss that a little bit?
If I walk in, and meeting the family for the first time, knowing that they have received a diagnosis, there can be anger, there can be denial, there can be a lot of sadness, and I definitely just try to reflect and recognize that and say, let's just start from ground one. This is why I'm here. If I feel comfortable enough with the family and the child is still young, I say, let's start with like baby boot camp. I try to say, all right, progress might not be as fast. I said, let's just take it a little step at a time.
And that probably helps reassure.
Right. And I try to say nowadays everyone goes on the internet and looks at neurofibromatosis or TSC, or they'll look at something, autism, but this says this, or I read this, or they'll have a family member, if I can pick on family, that seems to be an expert on something. Just to say, you can take that with a grain of salt, but let's just try to focus on what we're doing here right now.
All that information, I can only imagine that is a huge challenge in today's world, where people are coming with all kinds of stuff, and redirecting them. So that's one of the bigger challenges. What other challenges do you have as far as working with such a wide variety of different special needs? So, for instance, like you might see one kid that is fairly, involved, and then, I don't know, is that...
Some of my challenges, I hear you say, let's say they don't have a diagnosis, because we as clinicians cannot give a diagnosis of, for example, autism, but we see all the signs.
I see.
The parent, and we can say, we recommend you see a specialist, or we may say a developmental clinic. That might be a more comfortable word. Parents often are feared of getting a label.
Yes.
Or parents, if there's two parents, they don't agree. What does she know? Why is she saying that? Denial is a big thing. And I try to say, and I'll say, here, denial is okay, but let's get beyond that. It's okay to be angry. Their perfect child isn't perfect, but being in the field for so long, I can see beyond that so many of the children are perfect in my eyes. It's just they have a little sideways path to go.
Yeah, I guess I totally concur with that, and appreciate your perspective, because, as a parent and feeling a lot of isolation and frustration and not understanding labels, having an OT and other, so services come into the home when my kids were little was like, a hand to hold on to. So, yeah, I really appreciated that. What can parents be on the lookout for? Say they were, as far as symptoms that might indicate that their child has issues that definitely could be assisted by an occupational therapist. And I guess we were talking earlier about what, the benefit of just getting an evaluation as soon as possible. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Even though if they don't have a diagnosis, and let's say there are siblings and well-meaning friends and relatives saying that your child's not crawling the way their child did, or they're not walking or not talking, what's one of the great benefits of early intervention is you can call and just say, I'm a little bit concerned, and we can just come in and do an evaluation. And even if they just have a slight delay, we can see them for 6 months.
Right.
Just to make you at ease. And I think I've met parents just in the store saying, well, I'm a little concerned with. I said, just call us. I said, your insurance will pay for it. Or the Department of Public Health. I said, we'll just evaluate and put you at ease.
Okay, yeah, that's really helpful. And I think that the label issue, as a parent, and when I first diagnosed, worrying about extra labels, I know parents in the TSC community have talked about that. So can you tell me the value of why is a label, what might be the benefit of having a label?
The benefit
in addition to
having us come in would be more services.
Okay.
For example, autism, they will get extensive services, what they call ABA, which is Applied Behavior Analysis. It's just someone else coming in. And also, if they have a diagnosis, they most likely will be eligible for preschool at the age of 3 at no cost to the parent. There is that stigma still of having a label, but I would challenge parents that once you're in, quote unquote, the system and you meet other parents, that would break the isolation as well.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to both sides, and I have found that having a label is far more advantageous than not having the additional label as far as services throughout, the course of managing a tough diagnosis like TSC or neurofibromatosis. You personally, how do you take home the kid? Like, you see these kids, and how do you manage to not let that affect you personally, or is that impossible in your job and it's just part of the deal?
It's part of my job, and because of texting and internet, I bring it home. It's not unhealthy. I exercise a lot.